Sinkholes are formed when water erodes the overburden which is on top of the bedrock that contains limestone. It becomes a circular type hole filled with water, but at the same time it is draining sediment and water onto the subsurface, which is below the Earth's surface. One way it gets filled with water is if it gets clogged with rocks and soil. Sinkholes are also naturally occurring but are induced by human activities as well. For example, pumping water from wells can trigger sinkholes, which makes them collapse more easily. When sinkholes develop, they can cause a lot of damage to buildings, pipelines, and roadways. Not only do they make the ground sink, but they also can spread contamination into our groundwater by people using dumps to throw trash.
There are 3 different types of sinkholes that can form. The first is a process of dissolution. During this process, heavy water flows can enter pre-existing openings known as vertical joints and fractures. The rain is exposed between the joints in the limestone and can cause the carbonated rock to dissolve away from the surface and cause a small depression. This type of sinkhole can create wetlands and ponds. This is most common in Florida. The second type of sinkholes is cover subsidence, where it happens slower and the surface is covered in sediments that allow liquids to pass through it. Slowly, the sediments start to fall in the carbonate rock and create a surface depression of about 1 inch. The process continues with dissolution, and you could tell there is a huge dip in the surface. The third type is cover collapse, and this is where you wouldn't want to be, as it develops quickly and causes the most damage. This happens when clay covers the sediment completely. As the sediments fall in the cavity and form an arch, the cavity moves upward, which then causes a collapse and creates a dramatic sinkhole.
Sinkholes are most common in the states of Texas, Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, and Florida, which has the highest risk of getting the most sinkholes. Even though these are the most common states, they can happen worldwide, including California, like the most recent one in Studio City, where it swallowed 2 cars.
According to the American Info Maps, the chart shows where sinkholes are most likely to occur in the U.S. The orange parts are where the sinkholes may form. The red circular line is where the bedrock is less stable and may collapse. The star indicates the most recent and fatal sinkhole that happened in 2013.
According to strangesounds.org, these maps show us that around 40% of the U.S. lies in areas prone to sinkholes. The first map is just stating the states that I mentioned before that are most prone to sinkholes. This map is telling us that the evaporate rocks underlie about 35 to 40% of the United States. But all in all, there is not a lot of data about sinkholes in California because Florida is the most prone to them, because the entire state sits on top of several of thousands of feet of limestone, and we really are unsure about how much longer Florida could be around.
There's no known way to prevent a sinkhole, but there are ways to prepare for one. One of them is contacting your insurance company and having an adjuster inspect your property to see if your home is at risk. Common signs of a sinkhole forming are cracks in the interior joints, windows, or doors, deep cracks and separation of paved concrete walkways and driveways, or observing a cavity beginning to open. To learn more about how to prepare and get help, visit sinkholes.org.